Kael charted silent stars, a cartographer mapping the void, unaware the deepest silence he would ever know was a prelude to a connection that would shatter galaxies and forge a new future with Lyra, a warrior of the Arachne, rescued from forgotten chains on a desolate moon, just before their respective worlds learned their most trusted truths were intricately woven lies. He had landed the Star Wanderer, his modest cartography vessel, on Lethe's Veil, a moon whispered to be a graveyard of empires, its pockmarked surface veiled in a perpetual twilight of nebular dust. His mission was routine update stellar charts for a new trade route. But Kael, a man whose calm exterior was a carefully constructed fortress around a core of knowing insecurity, and the ghosts of a past mission gone terribly wrong, often found himself drawn to the anomalies, the whispers in the data streams. An unusual energy signature had pulsed from an uncharted fissure valley, too patterned to be natural, too faint to be active. Now, deep within that fissure, he stood before a colossal, blast-scarred door, clearly the entrance to a military bunker of a civilization lost to time. The air was thin, tasting of ozone and millennia of undisturbed dust. With a sigh that barely disturbed the profound stillness, Kael activated his breaching tool, its low hum a sacrilege in this ancient tomb. The heavy door hissed open, revealing not treasure, but a prison, and in its heart, Lyra. She was suspended in a crackling, amber energy field, her form humanoid but utterly alien. Her skin, where visible beneath a utilitarian, dark gray jumpsuit, was like polished gunmetal, catching the faint light from Kael's helmet lamp and flaring with shifting, iridescent colors blues, greens, and violets. It seemed to radiate a faint coolness. Clinging to her left shoulder, like an intricate piece of living jewelry, was a creature no larger than Kael's hand. It had multiple, slender limbs that constantly wove and rewove complex, luminous patterns across its own small body and onto Lyra's metallic skin. This, Kael would later learn, was her Glyph-Weaver, a symbiotic partner. Lyra's eyes, large in the color of molten gold, snapped open, instantly focused and fiercely intelligent. There was no fear in them, only a wary defiance, the bearing of a high-ranking military leader, even in captivity. Her posture, though constrained by the field, was regal, unbroken. Kael felt an unexpected jolt, not of fear, but of something akin to recognition, a shared sense of being out of place, out of time. The silence of the bunker was suddenly charged, filled with the unspoken questions of two souls from different ends of the galaxy, unexpectedly thrust together. He saw her gaze flick to the multi-tool in his hand, a standard Terran Confederacy issue. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face, perhaps disdain, perhaps assessment. He knew instinctively this first encounter was a precipice. Kael lowered his breaching tool, raising his hand slowly. "I'm Kael, a cartographer," he stated, his voice amplified slightly by his helmet, trying to keep it even, unflappable. "I mean you no harm. I detected an energy signature. I didn't expect this." His gaze flickered to the amber field. "Can you understand me?" Lyra watched him, her golden eyes narrowed. After a long moment, her voice, a low, resonant alto with a faint metallic timbre, filled the small chamber. "Your language is archaic, but comprehensible. Cartographer. A strange profession to find in a forgotten tomb." Her eyes assessed his ship's suit, the Terran Confederacy insignia on his shoulder. "You are far from your Confederacy's reach. Lethe's Veil is on the edge of charted space." Kael replied, feeling a prickle of his old insecurity. Was she judging his competence? This bunker wasn't on any map. He gestured towards the energy field. "How long have you been here? Who did this to you? Time flows differently in such places," she said evasively. "A's for who? They are long dust, like the builders of this cage." She shifted slightly, and the iridescent sheen on her skin rippled, the temperature seeming to drop a fraction around her. The Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder pulsed with a soft, cyan light. "Can you disable this field, cartographer?" Kael approached the control panel, a relic of unknown technology. It was remarkably preserved. "I can try. My specialty is navigation, not ancient prison systems, but I understand energy dynamics." He began to work, his movements precise, his face a mask of concentration. This was familiar territory in a way, deciphering complex systems, finding the pattern the key. He felt Lyra's intense gaze on his back. It wasn't threatening, but it was heavy with scrutiny. He thought of the guilt that always rode him, the mission where his mapping data, precise and accurate, had been used for something horrific. He pushed the thought away. Focus. The panel was surprisingly intuitive, its symbols alien yet following a discernible logic. After several tense minutes, during which the only sounds were Kael's soft movements and the hum of the failing energy field, a section of the amber containment flickered and died. Lyra tested it, pushing a hand through the gap. The metal of her skin seemed to absorb the lingering energy with a faint hiss. Kael worked faster, and soon the entire field collapsed with a sigh of dying power. Lyra stepped out, slowly, unsteadily. She was taller than him by a head, her build lean but powerful. The jumpsuit she wore was clearly a prisoner's garb, but beneath it, Kael could sense the coiled strength of a warrior. The Glyph-Weaver adjusted its position, its patterns now glowing with a warm, golden light that matched her eyes. "My thanks, Kael cartographer," she said, her voice still low, but with a new resonance. She flexed her metallic fingers, the joints moving with silent precision. "Just Kael," he corrected, offering a small, awkward smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What's your name? And your people?" "I am Lyra of the Kryll," she stated. There was a pride in her tone, but also a shadow. "And you have placed yourself in considerable danger by freeing me." As if on cue, a distant alarm began to blare through the ancient bunker's speaker system, a shrill, warbling cry that echoed through the dusty corridors. Red lights, previously dormant, began to flash, casting eerie, pulsing shadows. Automated defenses. Kael muttered, already turning towards the exit. Or did our entry trip something more current? This place was a listening post, then a forgotten prison, Lyra said, her eyes scanning the corridor beyond the doorway, already falling into a defensive stance. Its original masters are long gone. But such places often attract scavengers, or those who seek what was left behind. Kael's blood ran cold. He'd picked up faint, intermittent ship signals on his approach to Lethe's Veil, too weak to identify, which he dismissed as sensor ghosts. "We need to get to my ship, the Star Wanderer. It's not much, but it's fast," Lyra nodded, lid on. As they moved, Kael noticed her gait was incredibly graceful, almost silent despite the metallic quality of her skin. She moved like a predator, aware of every shadow, every sound. The Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder seemed to act as an extension of her senses, its delicate limbs twitching, its light patterns shifting with an almost prescient awareness of their surroundings. They encountered the first resistance near the bunker's main entrance. Two heavily armed figures in dark, unmarked armor, their faces obscured by visors. They weren't ancient constructs, their weapons were modern, firing bolts of disruptive energy. "Purifiers," Lyra hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The iridescent colors on her skin deepened, darkening to a stormy indigo, and Kael felt a distinct wave of cold emanate from her. "Species supremacists. They believe only their kind deserves the stars." Kael fired his sidearm, a standard-issue pulse pistol, providing cover fire. His shots were accurate, born of reluctant practice rather than skill. "They must have been tracking the same energy signature I was." Lyra moved with blinding speed. She didn't have a weapon, but she didn't seem to need one. She ducked under a sizzling energy bolt, her metallic arm lashing out, striking one purifier on the side of the helmet with a sickening crunch. The figure went down. The second purifier turned its weapon on her, but the Glyph-Weaver suddenly flared, a tiny, intricate shield of light deflecting the bolt, just enough for Lyra to close the distance. Her movements were a blur, ending with the second purifier collapsing. Kael stared, impressed and slightly intimidated. This was no mere prisoner, this was a seasoned combatant. They often seek out relics of lesser species to destroy or pervert. Lyra explained curtly, already moving towards the exit. Or technologies to amplify their hateful crusade. They burst out of the bunker into the dim twilight of Lethe's Veil. The Star Wanderer was parked on a relatively flat plateau, a few hundred meters away. Between them and the ship, two more purifiers were setting up a heavy repeating blaster. "Cover me," Kael yelled, sprinting towards a cluster of jagged rocks. He laid down suppressing fire, trying to keep their heads down. Lyra didn't follow him to cover. Instead, she ran directly towards the purifiers, a fluid, deadly shadow. Kael watched in horrified amazement as she weaved through their fire, her metallic skin sparking where stray shots grazed her, seemingly without effect. The Glyph-Weaver was a whirlwind of light and motion on her shoulder. As she closed in, Kael saw it detach one of its slender, glowing limbs, which solidified into a wickedly sharp, short blade of pure light in Lyra's hand. She disarmed and disabled both purifiers with an efficiency that spoke of countless battles. By the time Kael reached the ship, Lyra was already at the ramp, The light blade retracted, the Glyph-Weaver back in its place, pulsing softly. "They will have a ship nearby," she said, her breath coming only slightly faster. "Wynn must leave. Now." Inside the cramped cockpit of the Star Wanderer, Kael strapped himself in, hands flying over the controls. The engines whined to life. Lyra stood beside his command chair, her presence filling the small space. He glanced at her. Her skin was still a deep indigo, but the coldness had lessened. The Glyph-Weaver's patterns were slowly returning to a neutral blue. "Hold on," he said, and gunned the engines. The Star Wanderer leaped from the surface of Lethe's veil, leaving the forgotten bunker and the disabled Purifiers behind. As they cleared the moon's thin atmosphere, Kyle's sensors picked up a Purifier gunship detaching from the dark side of Lethe's veil, turning to intercept. "Company," he grunted, pushing the Star Wanderer's engines to their limit. His ship was a cartographer's vessel, built for endurance and detailed scanning, not combat. It had decent shields, but was outgunned. "Their targeting systems are locking on," Lyra observed calmly, her eyes fixed on the tactical display Kael had brought up. "Their intent is clearly to destroy us, not capture." Kael's knuckles were white on the controls. His unflappable mask was firmly in place, but beneath it, his heart hammered. This was bad. This was another situation spiraling out of his control, another potential catastrophe with him at the center. The guilt, sharp and familiar, pricked at him. He executed a sharp evasive maneuver, the G-forces pressing them into their seats. "I'm a cartographer, not a fighter pilot," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "You navigate, I will observe their tactics," Lyra said. Her calm was unnerving, yet strangely reassuring. She pointed to a nebula on the star chart display. "There. Can we reach it? Its interference might mask our signature." Kael gritted his teeth. "It's risky. Unstable gravimetric currents. But better than being target practice." He angled the ship towards the swirling clouds of cosmic dust and gas. The Purifier ship gained on them, its weapons firing relentlessly. Explosions rocked the Star Wanderer as its shields took hits. Warning lights flashed across Kael's console. Suddenly, Lyra reached out, her metallic fingers brushing against a secondary console that displayed incoming data streams. The Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder flared brightly. "They are broadcasting," she said. A coded message wide beam. Kael spared a glance. The encryption was complex military grade. "Can you decode it?" "The Kryll are adept at patterns," Lyra said. Her fingers flying over the interface Kael indicated, her touch surprisingly gentle yet firm on the controls. The Glyph-Weaver seemed to pulse in time with her efforts, tiny filaments of light briefly connecting its limbs to the console. Kael was too busy dodging weapon fire and navigating the increasingly turbulent approach to the nebula to pay much attention. Then, Lyra stiffened. The iridescent colors on her skin seemed to freeze, then shift rapidly through a chaotic spectrum. "By the silent stars," she whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. "What is it?" Kael yelled over the shriek of protesting metal as another hit rocked the ship. "The transmission, it's not just Purifier internal comms," Lyra said, her golden eyes wide, fixed on the decrypted text scrolling across the screen. "It references operational coordination between the Purifiers and a Terran Confederacy Black Ops unit, and a Kryll hegemony internal security fleet." She looked at Kael, her expression one of profound shock and a dawning, terrible understanding. "They're all connected. Your government, my government, they're working with these terrorists. Or using them." Kael felt the blood drain from his face. The Terran Confederacy. Collaborating with species supremacists like the Purifiers, and Lyra's own Kryll hegemony. It was unthinkable. His meticulously ordered galaxy, his belief in the fundamental, if flawed, decency of his own people shattered. The guilt he carried from his past mission suddenly felt heavier, more pointed. Had he been an unwitting pawn in something far larger, far more corrupt than he could have ever imagined? "That can't be right," he managed, but the conviction in his voice was hollow. The ship bucked violently as they entered the nebula's outer tendrils. The Purifier ship, perhaps wary of the gravimetric distortions or confident their prey was trapped, held back slightly, still firing sporadically. "The data is clear, Kael cartographer," Lyra said, her voice devoid of its earlier warmth, now flat with a chilling certainty. The iridescent colors on her skin had settled into a cold, hard silver. "We were not meant to leave Lethe's veil alive. You for finding me. Me. For whatever reason my own people now deem me a threat." Her disillusionment, hinted at before, now seemed a vast, bitter ocean. The Star Wanderer plunged into the densest part of the nebula. Outside, the universe dissolved into a swirling chaos of multicolored gas and crackling energy. Kael's sensors went haywire. "We've lost them for now," he gasped, fighting the controls as the ship was tossed about like a leaf in a storm. He cut the main engines, relying on maneuvering thrusters to navigate the treacherous currents. Silence descended in the cockpit, thick and suffocating, broken only by the groaning of the ship's stressed hull and the crackle of static from the fried external sensors. They were alone, cut off, adrift in a sea of cosmic uncertainty. Fugitives, not just from the Purifiers, but from everything they had once known, everything they had once, however misguidedly, trusted. Kael finally looked at Lyra. Her metallic face was unreadable, but her golden eyes held a storm of emotions. Betrayal, anger, and perhaps a flicker of something else, a grim solidarity. They were in this together whether they liked it or not. The Star Wanderer, his small, worn sanctuary, was now their only refuge against a galaxy that had suddenly, terrifyingly, turned hostile from all sides. Their unexpected union, forged in the heart of a forgotten prison, was now an alliance of necessity, a desperate pact against the darkness. The fight for their lives had just begun, and with it, unknowingly, the fight for a love that would defy empires. The immediate aftermath of the revelation hung heavy in the cramped cockpit of the Star Wanderer. For several long minutes, neither Kael nor Lyra spoke. The only sounds were the creaks of the ship settling, after its rough passage into the nebula, and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the Glyph-Weaver. As it traced calming patterns on Lyra's shoulder, Kael's mind reeled. The Terran Confederacy, his confederacy, in league with xenophobic terrorists. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. His past guilt, the weight of a mission where his cartography data had been misused with catastrophic results, now seemed to click into a larger, more sinister picture. Had that, too, been part of this dark collaboration? Lyra finally broke the silence, her voice low and gravelly. "My people have a saying, the brightest stars can hide the deepest shadows. I suspected corruption within the Kryll hegemony, the endless posturing, the resource grabs disguised as righteous crusades. It is why I sought a different path." She paused, her gaze distant. "To find them allied with such vermin as the Purifiers. It is a new depth of depravity." "I don't understand," Kael said, shaking his head, the unflappable facade cracking. "Why? What could they possibly gain from working with a group that wants to eradicate most of the galaxy?" "Power, Kael," Lyra stated, her tone devoid of surprise, only a wary cynicism. "Control. Perhaps the Purifiers are a convenient tool, a deniable asset to destabilize rival powers, or to acquire certain resources or technologies that official channels cannot." She looked at the datapad still displaying the decrypted transmission. This message mentioned Project Silence and Nexus of Echoes. "Do these terms mean anything to you?" Kael frowned. "Nexus of Echoes. I've heard whispers, fringe theories. A mythical place, a sort of universal consciousness, an akashic record for the galaxy. Most serious academics dismiss it as legend. Project Silence, however, sent a chill down his spine. There have been rumors, dark rumors, of a weapon capable of nullifying all sound in a vast area. Not just sound, but all vibratory energy, effectively ending life, communication, everything. A dead zone. It was considered too horrific, too uncontrollable. Lyra's metallic skin seemed to shimmer, a cold light playing over its surface. If the Purifiers seek this nexus, and our governments are enabling them, perhaps even to gain access to this silence weapon. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were terrifying. "We have to warn someone," Kael said, a surge of desperate urgency overcoming his shock. "The Galactic Council. Independent news outlets." Lyra gave a short, mirthless laugh. "And who would believe us, Kael? A discredited Kryll military commander and a Terran cartographer with a stolen prisoner. We are loose ends. Our governments will paint us as traitors, terrorists ourselves. The evidence we have is a single encrypted transmission. They will deny everything." The cold logic in her words was undeniable. Kael slumped back in his chair, the fight draining out of him. She was right. They were utterly alone. He felt a familiar wave of insecurity wash over him. He was just a map maker. How could he possibly stand against such overwhelming forces? "We need to survive first," Lyra continued, her voice regaining some of its command. "This nebula offers temporary shelter, but we need fuel, repairs." The Star Wanderer took damage. Kael nodded, forcing himself to focus. Survival. One step at a time. That he could manage. My ship has some self-repair capabilities, but they're slow, and we're low on refined helium-3. He pulled up the ship's diagnostic. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. Port shield emitter is at 30%. We're vulnerable. There is an asteroid mining outpost, untagged, in the Oracalus belt, 2 sectors from here, Lyra said, pointing to a barely visible notation on Kael's star chart. It's frequented by outlaws and those wishing to remain unseen. We might find supplies there and perhaps parts. Kael looked at her in surprise. How do you know that? It's not on any official Confederacy or Kryll chart. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Lyra's lips. A good commander knows the hidden pathways, the shadows where information and resources can be found. My previous career had its uses. Over the next few days, they navigated the treacherous nebula. Kael's cartography skills pushed to their limits as he plotted a course through the shifting gravimetric tides and sensor-jamming dust clouds. Lyra proved to be an invaluable co-pilot, her tactical mind quick to identify potential threats, and her knowledge of unconventional routes astonishing. They worked in shifts, the small cockpit forcing a proximity that was initially awkward but gradually became a strange sort of comfort. During one of Lyra's rest periods, Kael found himself watching her. She slept with a stillness that was almost unnerving, her metallic skin softly glowing in the dim light of the instrument panels. The Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder was quiescent, its patterns slow and rhythmic, like a gently breathing creature. He wondered about her past, about the disillusionment that had led a high commander of the Kryll to be imprisoned in that ancient bunker. He wondered about the strength it took to face such profound betrayal from her own people and still function with such focus. His own guilt felt like a childish burden in comparison. When Lyra was awake, they spoke guardedly at first, then with increasing openness. Kael learned more about Kryll culture. The emphasis on self-reliance was paramount. Every tool, every garment, ideally, should be crafted by the one who uses it or by a respected mentor or ancestor. Lyra explained, examining a small, intricately carved piece of what looked like hardened resin she had produced from a compartment in her boot. It imbues the object with spirit, with intent. It makes it an extension of the self, not merely a possession. She looked at Kael's standard-issue multi-tool with a critical eye. Your tools are mass-produced, efficient perhaps, but soulless. Kael, surprisingly, didn't feel offended. He felt intrigued. So that creature, the Glyph-Weaver, does it craft things for you? Lyra touched the symbiote gently. It is part of me, as I am of it. It translates my intent, my needs, into form. It can weave threads of light, shape energy, repair and create on a small scale. It is a gift of my lineage, a living conduit to the essence of making. As if to demonstrate, the Glyph-Weaver extended a delicate tendril and mended a small tear in Kael's sleeve, the repair seamless, shimmering faintly. Kael stared at the mended fabric. Incredible. Lyra also revealed more about her disillusionment. The Kryll were once explorers, artisans, philosophers. But generations of conflict, fueled by diminishing resources and ambitious leaders, twisted our path. We became warriors, efficient and feared, but we lost something vital in the process. I spoke out against the endless cycle of aggression, advocated for a return to older traditions of peace and creation. Such views were unpopular with the current hegemony leadership. Her golden eyes held a deep sadness. I suspect my rescue from that bunker was not what they intended. They likely placed me there to be forgotten, a problematic voice silenced. Kael, in turn, found himself opening up about his own burdens. He told her about the Alara system survey, how his detailed mapping of a supposedly uninhabited asteroid belt had been used by a clandestine Confederacy fleet to ambush a peaceful Solosian delegation, leading to a massacre. My maps led them there, he said, his voice thick with self-loathing. I just charted rocks and radiation fields. I never asked what the data would be used for. I just followed orders, did my job. The unflappable mask was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. Lyra listened patiently, her metallic expression unreadable but her golden eyes soft with an unexpected understanding. When he finished, she said quietly, guilt is a heavy burden, Kael. It can either crush you, or it can be forged into a resolve to do better. You did not fire the weapons. You were a tool, like one of your soulless instruments, used by those with dark intent. Now you are aware. Now, you can choose how you are wielded, or if you will be wielded at all. Her words, simple and direct, struck a chord deep within him. He looked at her, truly looked at her, not just as an alien warrior, but as someone who understood the weight of compromised ideals, the sting of betrayal. A fragile thread of trust began to weave itself between them, delicate yet surprisingly strong, spun in the shared darkness of their fugitive existence. They reached the Orachalus Belt, a chaotic jumble of rock and ice. The mining outpost, named Port Scramble, by its denizens was a hollowed-out asteroid, bristling with jury-rigged weapon emplacements, and an array of mismatched ships docked haphazardly. It was a den of smugglers, pirates, and refugees, a perfect place to disappear and resupply. Docking the Star Wanderer was tense. Lyra, her face partially obscured by a makeshift hood Kael had fashioned from a spare thermal blanket, stayed aboard while Kael ventured out to find fuel and parts. He bartered some of his less essential cartography equipment and a few rare mineral samples he'd collected on previous, more innocent expeditions. The air in Port Scramble was thick with alien languages, suspicious stares, and the smell of recycled air and unidentifiable fried food. He managed to acquire the necessary helium-3 and a compatible shield emitter, though the price was exorbitant. As he was returning to the ship, a rough-looking Zorgonian bumped into him, then snarled an apology before hurrying off. Kael thought nothing of it, until he was back aboard the Star Wanderer and realized his primary datapad, containing his personal logs and some sensitive, non-official star charts, was missing. His heart sank. He'd been careless, distracted by the stress. "What is it?" Lyra asked, noticing his distress. "My datapad, it's gone." "Pickpocketed, I think." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "It had some of my private research notes on uncharted systems. Nothing that directly implicates us, but—" Before he could finish, Lyra was moving. "Describe the Zorgonian." Kael did, and Lyra nodded. "There is a pawnbroker in the lower levels, a Grishnak named Slide, who deals in stolen information. Zorgonians often fence their petty thefts there." She picked up a heavy metal bar Kael used for leverage on stubborn access panels. "I will retrieve it." "Lyra, no. It's too dangerous. It's just a datapad." "It is yours," she said simply, her golden eyes intense. "And it was taken. That is an imbalance," she hefted the bar. "Besides, this tool," she tapped the metal bar, "feels solid. It has potential." Her cultural quirk about tools, Kael realized. She was imbuing this mundane object with her intent. Against his better judgment, Kael let her go, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. He paced the small confines of the Star Wanderer, his guilt over the lost datapad warring with his fear for Lyra's safety. An hour later, Lyra returned. She was unscathed, though there was a new scratch on her metallic cheekbone that seemed to gleam rather than bleed. She tossed Kael's datapad onto the console. Slide was reluctant, but he saw the wisdom in cooperation. She then produced a small, intricately woven pouch. And he also had this. Information about recent Purifier movements in this sector. They are searching for something called the Arbiter's Key, supposedly related to this Nexus of Echoes. Kael stared at her, a mixture of relief and awe washing over him. She hadn't just retrieved his property, she'd gained valuable intelligence. He noticed the metal bar was slightly bent. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Lyra met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of warmth in her golden eyes, a subtle softening of her features. The iridescent colors on her skin shifted, a warm bronze undertone appearing beneath the silver. "I am well, Kael." She touched the scratch on her cheek, a minor calibration. In that moment, something shifted between them. The shared danger, the forced intimacy, the dawning respect, and understanding it was coalescing into something deeper. Kael felt an unfamiliar stirring in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the ship's life support. He reached out, his fingers hesitating, just before they touched her arm. The metal of her skin was cool at first, then, to his surprise, seemed to warm slightly under his touch. The Glyph-Weaver pulsed a soft, rosy light. "Thank you, Lyra," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Her gaze held his, and the silence that fell between them was no longer heavy with unspoken fears, but alive with unspoken possibilities. The universe outside might be hostile, their former lives in ruins, but here, in the battered cockpit of the Star Wanderer, a fragile new connection was taking root, a bond forged in betrayal and tempered by shared resolve. They were no longer just two fugitives running for their lives, they were becoming partners. And perhaps, Kael dared to hope, something more. The days that followed their departure from Port Scramble settled into a tense rhythm of evasion and investigation. With the information Lyra had procured about the Arbiter's Key, they began to actively hunt for clues, trying to understand what the Purifiers were truly after and how it connected to the dreaded silence weapon and the mythical Nexus of Echoes. Kael's cartography skills became invaluable, not just for navigating asteroid fields and forgotten spaceways, but for deciphering ancient star charts and cross-referencing stellar phenomena mentioned in cryptic texts Lyra managed to access from unsecured academic databases. His insecurity began to recede, replaced by a quiet confidence as he saw his unique talents making a real difference. Lyra, in turn, revealed more facets of her complex nature. Her military discipline was ever present in her efficiency and strategic thinking, but Kael also saw her deep reverence for life and her profound connection to the spirit of things. She would spend hours meticulously repairing a damaged component of the Star Wanderer, not just fixing it, but, as she explained, realigning its essence. And remarkably, these repaired components often functioned better than before. The Glyph-Weaver was her constant companion and tool, its luminous patterns a beautiful, ever-changing script that Kael found himself increasingly fascinated by. He learned to read its subtle shifts in color and intensity, recognizing when Lyra was concentrating, when she was troubled, or, on rare occasions, when she was experiencing a moment of quiet contentment. One evening, while hiding in the shadow of a gas giant, its swirling storms a breathtaking vista outside their viewport, Lyra was meticulously cleaning and sharpening a piece of scavenged metal she intended to craft into a more suitable defensive tool for herself. Kael watched her, the rhythmic rasp of her owning stone a strangely soothing sound. "You miss your people's ways, don't you?" he asked softly. Lyra paused, her golden eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "I miss what my people could be," she corrected. "The potential we squandered. This," she indicated her crafting, "is a connection to that potential. To create something of use, of balance, with one's own hands, it is a form of meditation, a way to find order in chaos." Kael thought of his own work, the precise lines and calculations of his star charts. "I suppose mapping is my way of finding order," he mused, trying to make sense of the vastness. "There is honor in that," Lyra acknowledged. "But a map is a reflection of what is. Crafting is a reflection of what can be." She picked up a small, smooth stone Kael often fiddled with, a worry stone from his childhood. With a few deft movements, the Glyph-Weaver extruded a filament of silver light, etching a tiny, intricate spiral onto its surface. "A small warding," she said, handing it back. "To help focus your intent." Kael turned the stone over in his fingers. The spiral was beautiful, perfect. It felt warm to the touch. He looked at Lyra, his heart swelling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Thank you." Their investigation into the Arbiter's Key led them to a derelict research station in a decaying orbit around a dying star. The station had belonged to the Xylosians, the same peaceful species Kael's government had betrayed. The irony was not lost on him. According to the fragmented data they'd pieced together, the Xylosians had been studying ancient precursor artifacts, and one of their researchers had theorized the Arbiter's Key was not a physical object, but a specific set of coordinates, a navigational sequence that could unlock a path to the Nexus of Echoes. As they cautiously explored the silent, debris-strewn corridors of the station, Kael felt a profound sense of unease. This place was a tomb, a testament to the kind of brutality his own people, and Lyra's, were now complicit in. Suddenly, Lyra stiffened, her hand going to her temple. The Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder flared with an intense, erratic light, and the air around her seemed to shimmer. Objects on a nearby console rattled violently. "Lyra, what's wrong?" Kael asked, alarmed. She gasped, her eyes unfocused for a moment. "They're the currents. They are strong here." She leaned against a bulkhead, her metallic skin flickering through a rainbow of colors. "This place it resonates with the flow." Kael remembered the hints about her being a temporal anchor. "The being you're connected to," he ventured. Lyra nodded, her breath ragged. "It is agitated. This station, there is a wound in time here, an echo of great pain." She closed her eyes, concentrating. The Glyph-Weaver's light stabilized, focusing into a beam that projected a complex, swirling pattern onto the opposite wall. It is showing me something. A hidden data core. The Xylosian researcher, she knew they were coming. She tried to hide her work. Following the Glyph-Weaver's guidance, they found a concealed compartment containing a heavily encrypted data crystal. It took Kael hours, with Lyra's intuitive assistance deciphering the alien encryption logic. But finally they broke through. The crystal contained the Xylosian researcher's final logs, her desperate hope that someone would find her work, and, crucially, what appeared to be a partial sequence of the Arbiter's key complex astrometric calculations. But their discovery came at a price. As Kael downloaded the data, an alert klaxon blared through the Star Wanderer, still docked to the station. Proximity alert! Kael shouted. Purifier cruiser emerging from FTL jump. They must have tracked us here, or they were also seeking the Seleusian data. Lyra surmised, her voice already taut with battle readiness. We need to leave, now. They scrambled back to the Star Wanderer, the Purifier cruiser already launching fighters. The escape was harrowing. Kael pushed his small ship to its absolute limits, weaving through the station's superstructure while Lyra, her newly crafted energy lance crackling in her hand, fired pinpoint shots from the co-pilot station, disabling several pursuing fighters. Her metallic skin was the color of molten bronze, radiating heat Kael could feel even across the cockpit. The Glyph-Weaver moved like lightning, augmenting her targeting, occasionally flaring with a defensive pulse that shimmered around the Star Wanderer's shields. One Purifier fighter got too close, its cannons tearing a gash along the Star Wanderer's flank before Lyra vaporized its engine block. Alarm screamed. We're losing atmosphere on Deck 3. Kael yelled, fighting to maintain control. Shields are failing? Seal it off, Lyra ordered, then her eyes widened. Kael, look out! A larger Purifier vessel, a frigate, had maneuvered to cut off their escape route, its heavy cannons charging. There was nowhere to run. This was it. Kael's mind went strangely calm. He thought of his past failures, the guilt he'd carried for so long. If this was the end, at least he was fighting for something worthwhile, with someone he cared about more than he'd admitted even to himself. He glanced at Lyra. Her face was set in a grim mask of determination, her golden eyes blazing. Even facing overwhelming odds, she was magnificent, terrible, and beautiful. In that moment, all his insecurity, all his carefully constructed walls, crumbled. Lyra, he said, his voice surprisingly steady over the din of battle. If we don't make it out of this, she turned to him, her expression softening for a fraction of a second. We will make it, Kael. But her eyes told him she understood the unspoken. Then the unexpected happened. The Purifier frigate, just as it was about to fire, suddenly shuddered violently. Its weapon systems flickered and died. Confused, Kael looked at his sensors. A Terran Confederacy destroyer had just warped into the system, guns blazing not at them, but at the Purifier frigate. It was followed by 2 Kryll hegemony cruisers, also firing on the Purifiers. What in the void? Kael breathed. Lyra was equally stunned. Are they fighting each other? The battle raged around them, a chaotic three-way melee. It seemed their former governments weren't as monolithic in their conspiracy as they'd thought, or perhaps different factions were now at odds. This chaos was their only chance. Kael spotted a narrow vector through the fighting, a path that might lead them to open space. Hold on, he yelled, and plunged the battered Star Wanderer into the fray. They dodged explosions, debris, and stray weapon fire. Once a Terran torpedo locked onto them, but Lyra, with an incredible feat of reflexes, used her energy lance to detonate it prematurely, the shockwave buffeting them violently. Finally, they broke free, leaving the unexpected battle raging behind them. Kael navigated them to a supposedly empty sector, engaging the cloaking device they'd acquired. At port scramble, its reliability dubious at best. Only when they were relatively sure they weren't being followed did they allow themselves to breathe. The Star Wanderer was severely damaged, barely holding together. Kael slumped in his chair, exhausted, trembling with adrenaline. Lyra reached out, her metallic hand gently covering his on the control yoke. Her skin was warm, the iridescence soft. We made it, Kael, she said, her voice a low murmur. He turned his hand, his fingers lacing with hers. Her grip was strong, reassuring. He looked into her golden eyes and saw not just a warrior or an alien, but a partner, a confidantee, someone who had faced death with him and chosen to stand by his side. The fear, the desperation of the battle, had stripped away all pretense. Lyra, he began, his voice husky. She silenced him with a gentle pressure of her fingers. I know, Kael. Her gaze was unwavering, filled with an emotion that mirrored his own. I feel it too. Slowly, hesitantly, he leaned towards her. She met him halfway. Their lips met, a tentative exploration at first, then deepening as the dam of unspoken feelings finally broke. Her metallic lips were surprisingly soft, cool at first contact then warming rapidly, sending a jolt of unexpected electricity through him. The Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder pulsed with a cascade of soft, rosy and golden lights, its patterns swirling in intricate, joyful abandon. It was a kiss that tasted of stardust and desperation, of shared survival and a dawning, defiant love. In the heart of their wrecked ship, surrounded by a hostile galaxy, Kael and Lyra found a sanctuary in each other, their unexpected union blossoming into a romance as vast and unpredictable as the stars themselves. The stakes had never been higher, their enemies more powerful, but now, they faced it all together, their connection a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The fight for their love, and for a future they were only just beginning to imagine, had truly solidified. The aftermath of their harrowing escape and the unexpected kiss left Kael and Lyra in a state of fragile intimacy amidst the wreckage of the Star Wanderer. Repairs were urgent. They found refuge in the gravity well of a rogue planet, a lightless wanderer in the interstellar void, its presence masked by dense radiation clouds. Here, shielded from prying sensors, they began the arduous task of patching up their ship. Kael's engineering knowledge was stretched to its limit, but Lyra's resourcefulness proved astounding. Using scavenged parts from the damaged sections of the ship and her innate Kryll ability to imbue objects with a spirit, she fashioned repairs that were both functional and strangely elegant. The Glyph-Weaver was an extension of her will, its delicate limbs weaving metallic threads to seal hull breaches, its energy pulses coaxing damaged systems back to life. During these long, quiet hours of work, their bond deepened. They spoke of their pasts, their dreams, the futures they had once envisioned before their worlds had betrayed them. Kael confessed the full extent of his guilt over the Alara system massacre, the faces of the Solosians haunting his sleep. Lyra, in turn, spoke of the Kryll's lost heritage, of a time when their connection to the flow of existence, the very same energy that made her a temporal anchor, was used for creation and understanding, not conquest. She explained that the being she anchored was ancient, formless, a consciousness caught in the eddies of time, and her lineage was tasked with providing it a stable point, a connection to the present. The Glyph-Weaver was the primary interface, a biological marvel that helped modulate the temporal energies. If the being became too unstable, or if Lyra was too far from places of temporal confluence, like the ancient bunker, it could cause distortions. Minor at first, but potentially catastrophic if unchecked. This was why her people had perhaps seen her as a liability once her disillusionment became known a powerful, potentially unstable asset they could no longer control. One cycle, as Lyra worked to reinforce a damaged support strut, her metallic skin glowing with a soft internal luminescence in the dim emergency lighting, Kael found himself simply watching her. The way the light played over the shifting planes of her face, the focused intensity in her golden eyes, the graceful efficiency of her movements, he was utterly captivated. "You are staring, Kael cartographer," she said without looking up, a hint of amusement in her voice. Kael felt a blush creep up his neck. I was just admiring your work. You make it look easy." Lyra paused, turning to him. The light from the Glyph-Weaver cast a soft halo around her. "Nothing worth doing is ever easy, Kael. But it can be fulfilling." Her gaze lingered on his, and the air between them thickened with unspoken words. Later, as they shared their meager rations, Kael reached for her hand across the small table. "That kiss," he began, then hesitated. Lyra's fingers curled around his. Her skin was warm, the iridescence a soft rose gold. It was not unwelcome. She admitted, a rare vulnerability in her eyes. In Kryll culture, such a sharing of breath of essence is significant. It signifies a joining of paths. "Is that what this is?" Kael asked, his heart pounding. "A joining of paths." "Our paths were joined the moment you opened that bunker door, Kael," she replied. "What we choose to make of that union, that is up to us." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her metallic knuckles. "I choose this," he whispered. "I choose you, Lyra." A slow smile, radiant and breathtaking, spread across her face. "And are you, Kael?" Their romance, however, was not a gentle idyll. The threat of the Purifiers, and their own duplicitous governments, still loomed. The partial data from the Solosian crystal gave them a piece of the Arbiter's key, but they needed more. They learned that the Purifier leader, High Vindicator Theron, was becoming increasingly bold, his rhetoric more inflammatory, his attacks more frequent. Rumors of the silence weapon being tested on remote, undefended colonies began to surface on the darknet channels Lyra monitored. Chilling audio logs abruptly cut short painted a horrifying picture of absolute, unearthly quiet descending upon bustling settlements, followed by nothing. The weapon didn't just kill, it erased, leaving behind zones of utter stillness, where not even the faintest echo of life remained. The thought of such a weapon in Theron's hands, coupled with his desire to control the Nexus of Echoes, which Kael now suspected was a real, incredibly powerful source of knowledge or energy, spurred them on. They used this illusion data to predict where Theron might search for the next piece of the key. Their calculations pointed to a forgotten precursor archive hidden within a treacherous cosmic anomaly known as the Serpent's Coil. Navigating the Serpent's Coil was a nightmare. Gravitic shears, radiation bursts, and fields of crystalline structures that shredded shields made the journey perilous. Kael's piloting skills were tested to their breaking point, his unflappable demeanor a thin veneer over raw nerves. Lyra, beside him, was a pillar of calm strength, her military training allowing her to anticipate dangers, her connection to the temporal currents, sometimes giving her flashes of precognition that saved them from disaster more than once. During one particularly violent gravitic shear, the Star Wanderer was thrown into an uncontrolled spin. Kael fought the controls, but the ship was unresponsive. Debris hurtled towards their main viewport. Lyra, without a word, placed her hands on Kael's shoulders. The Glyph-Weaver flared with an intense blue light. For a fraction of a second, Kael felt a strange sense of temporal dislocation, as if time itself stuttered. The largest piece of debris, which had been on a direct collision course, inexplicably shifted its trajectory, missing them by meters. What was that? Kael gasped, regaining control. Lyra looked pale, her metallic skin a dull gray. A slight adjustment to the flow, she said weakly. The being it sometimes lends its perspective. The effort, however, clearly cost her. They found the precursor archive, a colossal, crystalline structure pulsating with faint energy. But they weren't the first. Purifier ships patrolled its perimeter. Theron himself was there, his flagship, the Final Purity, a monstrous vessel bristling with weapons, overseeing an excavation operation. We can't fight our way in, Kael said, studying the sensor readings. We're outgunned and outnumbered 100 to 1. Lyra nodded, her eyes narrowed in thought. Theron is arrogant. He believes himself untouchable. Perhaps we can use that. She tapped the console displaying the data on the silence weapon. They are still testing it, refining it. They wouldn't risk deploying a fully operational version near their own flagship unless absolutely necessary. But if they believe a significant threat is present, a daring, almost suicidal plan began to form. They would use the Star Wanderer's damaged state and limited cloaking ability to feign a desperate, lone attack, hoping to draw Theron's attention and force him to reveal more about the silence weapon's status or deployment, or perhaps even provide an opportunity to sabotage it. It was a long shot, a fool's errand, but it was the only chance they had. As they prepared, Lyra took Kael's hands. Her skin was warm, vibrant with color. Kael, whatever happens, fighting beside you has given my life a purpose I thought I had lost forever. Kael's throat tightened. You are my purpose now, Lyra. He confessed, his insecurity a distant memory, burned away by the intensity of his feelings for her. He pulled her close, kissing her deeply, a kiss of desperation, love, and a shared, unwavering resolve. Their feigned attack was chaotic and brutal. The Star Wanderer, already battered, took heavy fire. Kael, with Lyra calling out targets and coordinating their meager defenses, performed miracles of evasion. They managed to get close enough to the Final Purity to see Theron on its main view screen, his face contorted in a sneer of contempt as he ordered their destruction. Then, as Lyra had predicted, a smaller, specialized Purifier vessel moved into position, a strange, multi-pronged array deploying from its underbelly. That's it, Kael yelled. The silence weapon emitter. They're preparing to fire it. Lyra confirmed, her voice tight. A localized burst to make an example of us, but just as the weapon began to charge, its telltale energy signature flooding Kael's sensors, a new set of contacts appeared on the tactical display. A small fleet of ships, bearing the insignia of a loose coalition of independent systems and disgruntled ex-Confederacy and ex-Kryll officers, warped into the Serpent's Coil, attacking the Purifier fleet from the rear. It seemed their earlier chaotic encounter and subsequent discreet leaks of the government conspiracy data by Kael had borne fruit, sparking a small but determined rebellion. The surprise attack threw the Purifiers into disarray. Theron, enraged, ordered the silence weapon to be redirected towards the new arrivals. This was their chance. While the Purifiers were distracted, Kael piloted the Star Wanderer on a daring dive towards the weaponed ship. Lyra, using her lance with deadly precision, targeted the emitter array's power couplings. Explosions rocked the Purifier vessel. The silenced weapon sputtered, then died, its charge dissipating harmlessly. Theron, his face a mask of fury on the final Purity's view screen, realized he'd been tricked and outmaneuvered. He roared orders, but the tide of the battle was turning against him. The coalition forces, though smaller, fought with desperate courage. "He's pulling back," Kael exclaimed, watching the final Purity begin to withdraw. But he's not running. He's heading for a specific set of coordinates deeper within the coil. Lyra, cross-referencing the coordinates with their precursor archive data. Gasp. Kael, that's where the Solosians believe the final access point to the Nexus of Echoes is located. Theron isn't retreating, he's making a final play for the ultimate prize. She looked at Kael, her eyes blazing. And it's also where he keeps his trophies. His museum of galactic horrors. The coalition forces were doing their best, but Theron's flagship was a fortress. Kael and Lyra knew what they had to do. They had to follow Theron, stop him from reaching the Nexus, and end his reign of terror once and for all. The Star Wanderer, battered but not broken, changed course, plunging deeper into the Serpent's coil, towards a confrontation that would decide not just their fate, but potentially the fate of the galaxy. Their love had been forged in fire. Now, it would be tested in the heart of darkness itself. The journey towards High Vindicator Theron's Museum of Galactic Horrors was a descent into a uniquely terrifying region of the Serpent's coil. Ancient, derelict megastructures, remnants of forgotten wars fought by long-dead civilizations, littered the distorted space-time, their jagged silhouettes like teeth in a cosmic maw. Kael navigated with grim precision, the Star Wanderer groaning under the strain of constant evasive maneuvers to avoid both debris and lingering Purifier patrols. Lyra beside him was a silent, watchful presence, her metallic skin a somber pewter, the Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder tracing intricate, warding patterns. The partial data they had on the Arbiter's key, combined with Theron's fleeing trajectory, was their only guide. The Solution logs mentioned this region, Kael said, his voice low. They called it the Scar of Oblivion, a place where the veil between realities is thin. They theorized the Nexus of Echoes might have a node, or an interface point here, a fitting location for a museum of horrors. Lyra commented, her tone laced with contempt. Theron collects not just artifacts but species, ideologies, anything he deems inferior, or a threat to purity. He twists them, breaks them, displays them as warnings. Her hands clenched into fists. Many Kryll artifacts, perhaps even people, have vanished over the years, rumored to have ended up in his collection. The Star Wanderer, utilizing its damaged but still partially functional cloaking device, slipped past the outer defenses of Theron's destination, a colossal, mobile space station, shaped like a distorted obsidian claw, clinging to the edge of a swirling vortex of dark energy. This was the Museum of Galactic Horrors. Its surface bristled with weapon emplacements, and a sickening aura of despair seemed to emanate from it, a palpable chill that even Kael's pragmatic senses registered. "He's already docked the final Purity," Lyra observed, pointing to the flagship nestled within one of the station's massive docking bays. "He'll be moving quickly to access whatever conduit to the Nexus exists here." Their plan was desperate: infiltrate the museum, locate Theron, and stop him before he could harness the power of the Nexus. Disabling the silence weapon had been a victory, but Theron with access to a universal consciousness was an even greater threat. They also had to find a way to expose his atrocities to the wider galaxy, to ensure his ideology couldn't simply fester and return. Using a maintenance tunnel Kael identified from stolen schematics, a testament to his meticulous data gathering, even in their flight they managed to dock the battered Star Wanderer in a forgotten, unmonitored section of the station. The air inside the museum was cold, sterile, and carried a faint, metallic tang that reminded Kael of old blood. The corridors were vast, cathedral-like, lined with display cases and stasis fields holding exhibits. Kael felt a wave of nausea. Preserved specimens of countless alien species, some contorted in agony. Devices of torture presented as scientific instruments. Cultural artifacts defaced and displayed as symbols of failed civilizations. It was a monument to sadism and supremacist ideology. Lyra walked through these halls of horror with a frozen composure, but Kael could see the fire in her golden eyes. The way her metallic skin seemed to harden, reflecting the cold, Harsh lighting. The Glyph-Weaver was a tight knot of furious, crimson light on her shoulder. "He will pay for this," she whispered, her voice a deadly promise. They moved like ghosts, Kael's knowledge of station layouts and Lyra's combat awareness guiding them. The temporal distortions Lyra had warned about were stronger here near the vortex. Kael experienced flashes of déjà vu, saw fleeting images of other times, other possibilities. Lyra seemed to draw strength from it, her movements becoming even more fluid, her senses preternaturally sharp. The being she anchored was more present, its influence a subtle pressure on Kael's perception, a whisper at the edge of hearing. They learned from an unguarded terminal that Theron was in the central sanctum of the museum, a place called the Chamber of Eternal Silence, attempting to activate a precursor device believed to be the interface to the Nexus. They raced towards it, encountering pockets of Purifier guards. Lyra moved with the deadly grace Kael had witnessed before, her energy lance a blur of light, her metallic fist striking with bone-jarring force. Kael, no longer just a cartographer, fought beside her, his pulse pistol spitting focused energy bolts, his unflappable demeanor now a genuine calm, resolve born of conviction, and his desire to protect Lyra. His past guilt was a motivator, not a hindrance. He would not be a passive observer to atrocity again. They reached the Chamber of Eternal Silence. It was a vast, circular room, the walls lined with empty stasis pods as if awaiting new exhibits. In the center, on a raised dais, stood High Vindicator Theron, his back to them, before a colossal, crystalline interface that hummed with immense power. The air crackled with energy, and the vortex of dark matter outside a massive viewport seemed to pulse in time with the device. "Theron." Lyra's voice rang out clear and commanding. The High Vindicator turned, a cruel smile spreading across his sharp, ascetic features. He was tall, clad in ornate white and gold armor that proclaimed his self-appointed purity. "I, the Kryll abomination and her pet cartographer. I wondered if you'd have the courage to follow me to my inner sanctum. You've been surprisingly resilient. Your reign of terror ends here, Theron," Kael declared, stepping forward, his pistol steady. Theron laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Ends. My dear deluded fools, it is just beginning. Once I merge my consciousness with the Nexus of Echoes, I will possess all knowledge, all history. I will guide the galaxy to its true, pure destiny, cleans to the weak, the flawed, the alien." He gestured to the crystalline interface. "This device, left by the glorious precursors, will be my conduit. And you will have the honor of being the first new exhibits in my renovated chamber symbols of futile resistance." He lunged, not with a weapon, but with a surge of raw psionic energy, a power Kael hadn't anticipated. Kael cried out as an invisible force slammed into him, sending him sprawling. Lyra, however, stood firm, her metallic skin flaring with an inner light. The Glyph-Weaver pulsed, and a shimmering barrier of energy absorbed the brunt of Theron's attack. "Your powers are crude, Theron." Lyra snarled, her energy lance igniting. Based on hatred and fear, the fight was joined. Theron was incredibly powerful, his psionic attacks capable of tearing through plasteel, his movements unnervingly fast. But Lyra was his match. Her Kryll combat skills, augmented by her unique biology and her connection to the temporal currents, made her a whirlwind of deadly grace. Her metallic skin deflected glancing psionic blows, and the Glyph-Weaver seemed to anticipate Theron's moves, creating micro-shields, disrupting his concentration with flashes of disorienting light. Kael, recovering, saw his opportunity. While Lyra kept Theron engaged, he focused on the precursor device. Its energy levels were spiking, threatening to overload or grant Theron the connection he craved. Kael's cartographer's mind raced, analyzing the energy flows, the resonant frequencies. He wasn't a warrior, but he understood systems. He saw a flaw, a feedback loop that could be exploited. "Lyra, I need a distraction." "A big one," he yelled, scrambling towards a control panel near the device. Lyra heard him. With a furious battle cry, she unleashed a devastating series of attacks, forcing Theron back, her energy lance leaving searing trails in the air. The High Vindicator, enraged by her resistance, focused all his power on her. "You will break, alien!" he roared. This was Kael's chance. He slammed his fist onto the panel, overriding safety protocols, rerouting power, creating a cascading overload. The precursor device shrieked, arcs of uncontrolled energy lashing out. Theron, caught off guard by the sudden surge, screamed as the energies of the Nexus, raw and untamed, flooded into him, not as knowledge, but as chaotic, overwhelming force. His psionic powers went haywire. The chamber of eternal silence began to shake apart. Stasis pods shattered. The vortex outside the viewport seemed to surge inwards. Lyra, seeing Theron momentarily incapacitated, seized her chance. With a precise strike of her lance, she shattered a critical focusing crystal on the precursor device. The connection to the Nexus sputtered and died. Theron, his body racked by uncontrolled energies, his eyes blazing with madness, turned on Kael. "Yo, you insignificant speck! You have ruined everything!" He raised a hand, a bolt of pure destructive force coalescing. But before he could unleash it, Lyra was there. She tackled Theron, her metallic body a shield for Kael. The bolt struck her in the back. She cried out, a sound of pure agony that tore through Kael's heart. Her iridescence flickered and died, her skin turning a dull, lifeless gray. The Glyph-Weaver shrieked a high-pitched sound of pure distress, then went dark. "Lyra!" Kael screamed. Theron, cackling, tried to rise, but the feedback from the damaged Nexus interface was too much. His body began to convulse, then dissolve into motes of corrupted energy, his final scream of rage and despair swallowed by the roar of the collapsing chamber. Kael rushed to Lyra's side. She lay still, her eyes closed. He frantically checked for a pulse, for any sign of life. Her metallic skin was cold, so cold. "No, Lyra, please." He choked out, tears streaming down his face. His unflappable composure was shattered, his insecurity replaced by a terrifying hollow despair. Then, a faint flicker. The Glyph-Weaver, though dark, twitched. A tiny, almost imperceptible pulse of warmth emanated from Lyra's chest. Hope, fragile and desperate, surged through Kael. He remembered her connection to the temporal currents, to the being she anchored. Perhaps it wasn't over. He gathered her into his arms, heedless of the station alarms blaring, the structure groaning around them. He had to get her out. He had to save her. Their fight wasn't over. Their love, their new life, it couldn't end here, in this museum of horrors. Kael, cradling Lyra's inert form, stumbled through the collapsing corridors of the Museum of Galactic Horrors. Debris rained down, and the station groaned its death throes as the unstable energies from the damaged Nexus interface tore it apart. His mind was a maelstrom of fear and desperate hope. Lyra's skin remained cold and gray, the vibrant iridescence gone, the Glyph-Weaver a dull, lifeless ornament on her shoulder. Yet that faint, lingering warmth he'd felt in her chest was a tiny ember he clung to. He reached the Star Wanderer, alarms blaring on its own board as the station's structural integrity failed. He laid Lyra gently on the medical bunk, his hands trembling as he activated the emergency bioscanners. The readings were confusing. Minimal life signs, yet a strange underlying energy signature he'd never encountered before, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat beneath a frozen sea. It was the temporal energy, he realized, the connection to the being she anchored, fighting to maintain its hold. With the station shaking itself to pieces around them, Kael scrambled to the cockpit, firing up the engines. The docking clamps were jammed. With a roar of desperation, he pushed the engines to overload, blasting the Star Wanderer free, just as the section of the museum they were in imploded. He navigated through the wreckage, dodging exploding debris, and the dying remnants of Theron's fleet, which had been decimated by the Coalition forces and the station's own self-destruction. Once clear, he raced back to Lyra's side. He held her cold, metallic hand, whispering her name, pouring out his fears, his love, his desperate pleas for her to return. Hours passed. The Star Wanderer, battered but space-worthy, drifted in the relative quiet of the Serpent's Coil, a silent vigil in the aftermath of chaos. Kael refused to sleep, refused to eat, his gaze fixed on Lyra's still face. His guilt, once a constant companion, was now a raging inferno. He had let this happen to her. He hadn't been strong enough, fast enough. Then, a flicker. A tiny spark of sapphire light in the center of the Glyph-Weaver. Kael's breath hitched. The spark grew, spreading through the symbiote's delicate limbs, slowly at first, then with increasing strength. The Glyph-Weaver began to pulse, a soft, rhythmic blue. And as it did, a faint iridescence returned to Lyra's skin, starting around her heart and spreading outwards like a sunrise. Her metallic flesh began to warm beneath his touch. Her eyelids fluttered. Golden eyes hazy at first, then focusing on his face. A small, weak smile touched her lips. "Kael," she whispered, her voice raspy. Tears of relief streamed down Kael's face. He choked back a sob, pressing her hand to his cheek. "Lyra, I thought I'd lost you." The connection it held," she murmured, her strength slowly returning. "The being it shielded my essence. The Glyph-Weaver rebooted my systems. She looked at her hand, flexing her fingers. The iridescence was returning, a soft pearlescent sheen. My armor, it seems to have taken the brunt. But I will require extensive recalibration. Relief, so profound it was almost painful, washed over Kael. He helped her sit up, supporting her. Their embrace was fierce, desperate, a reaffirmation of everything they had fought for, everything they meant to each other. In the wake of unimaginable danger, their bond was not just confirmed. It was forged anew, stronger, deeper, unbreakable. News of Theron's defeat and the destruction of his museum of galactic horrors spread like wildfire. Kael, using the data he'd managed to download from the museum's corrupted systems, before its collapse, harrowing evidence of Theron's atrocities broadcast it across all accessible channels. The Galactic Council, shamed by the revelations of Confederacy and Kryll complicity that Kael and Lyra had also leaked, was forced to act. Investigations were launched. Corrupt officials were ousted. The Purifier movement, leaderless and exposed, began to crumble. Kael and Lyra, however, knew they couldn't return to their old lives. They were heroes to some, traitors to others, but they had each other, and they had a new purpose. The Solosian data, the glimpse of the Nexus of Echoes, the horrors of the museum had all pointed to a galaxy desperately in need of understanding, of connection, not conflict. A few years drifted by like stardust. On a peaceful, neutral planet named Agora Prime, nestled in a trinary star system known for its breathtaking auroras, a new institution rose. The Kael-Lyra University for Interspecies Studies. Funded by reparations from the shamed governments and donations from systems eager for a new era of cooperation, it became a beacon of hope. Kael, no longer the insecure cartographer, but a respected academic and explorer, headed the Department of Xenocartography and Navigational Ethics, teaching students how to map not just stars, but understanding between cultures. His past guilt had been transformed into a profound sense of responsibility. Lyra, her vibrant iridescence fully restored, her presence commanding yet gentle, became the chancellor of the university. She taught Kryll philosophy, defensive arts focused on de-escalation, and the ethics of leadership. Her cultural tenet of imbuing objects with spirit found new meaning as she helped students from hundreds of species craft a shared future. The Glyph-Weaver, now often shimmering with calm, wise patterns of sapphire and gold, became an unofficial symbol of the university, a living testament to symbiosis and creation. The being she anchored, its presence now a gentle undercurrent rather than a disruptive force, sometimes offered profound, cryptic insights through her, enriching the university's research into the deeper mysteries of the cosmos, including the responsible study of phenomena like the Nexus of Echoes. One evening, Kael found Lyra standing on the university's observation deck, looking out at the swirling colors of Agora Prime's aurora, which danced across the star-dusted sky. He came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. Her metallic skin was warm against his. Thinking about old battles? He asked softly. Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder. Thinking about new beginnings, she replied. About how an unexpected union, forged across the stars amidst fighting for our lives, can lead to this. She gestured to the sprawling campus below, alive with light and the murmur of diverse voices. A new life, not just for us, but for so many. Kael kissed the top of her iridescent head. We fought for love, Lyra. And in doing so, we helped fight for a little more love in the galaxy. The Glyph-Weaver on her shoulder pulsed with a soft, contented light, mirroring the countless stars above. Their journey had been one of unimaginable hardship, of betrayal and loss, but it had also been one of profound discovery, courage, and a love that had not only saved them, but had sparked a change across the cosmos. Together, Kael the cartographer and Lyra the Kryll warrior, an unexpected union bound by an unbreakable love, stood as living proof that even in the deepest darkness, new life and new hope could always find a way to shine. Their future, like the stars they so often gazed upon, was vast, bright, and beautifully shared.